very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio and Global Alert News for the week of August 11th, 2015. The global theater of idiocracy continues on all sides. The worse things get, the more in denial people become. And the more the power structure in mainstream media tries to distract a population that's all too willing to be distracted with events that do not matter in the bigger picture context. So as we have a biosphere that's literally imploding, ecosystems around the globe literally imploding, the planet's ability to produce the substances necessary for survival to occur imploding, all we see on mainstream TV is one distraction after another that have importance in and of themselves, but in the bigger context mean virtually nothing at this point in comparison to being on track for a planet that doesn't support life. I don't think that it's hard to argue that point. Ferguson, what do we see on the mainstream media? We see a lot of Ferguson, a lot of divide and conquer, and it's not just the race division. It's not just the black-white division that those in power try to fuel. It's the division between civilian and law enforcement. That division is pushed very, very hard to alienate the law enforcement, and there's a lot of great people in law enforcement. Lots of them. I know many of them. They try their best to do their job in the best manner they can, and they're human like the rest of us. They make mistakes, but there are truly a lot of great people in law enforcement. There are some bad ones as well, and we see those bad ones, and the media does their best to expose those people in a way that causes division, that causes animosity. And the same with, for example, the protests in Ferguson that the media is using to distract us right now. If those people in Ferguson really wanted to help, they would stop burning and breaking things and make whatever they do peaceful. Because when they buy into the riot mentality, they're doing exactly what the power structure wants them to do, fueling the division, causing a distraction while things of much greater magnitude are unfolding around the globe, issues that hold all life on Earth in the balance. So again, we're watching Ferguson. We're watching, even worse, we're watching the mainstream media mass distraction machine show us the latest political theater of idiocracy led by Donald Trump. It's truly astounding. And the rest of the world must look at us here in the United States and be completely perplexed at how this country even functions with the sort of ridiculousness we see in the political arenas. Should it be legal to have a father and a son be president and maybe another son next? Or how about a husband and a wife? Is that really a democracy when these people who are completely connected, that are part of the power structure, can all become the leaders of this country? Well, at least at face value, we all know that the presidential post is nothing more than a prop in the play, and those behind the scenes are really pulling the strings. But bottom line is, the rest of the world must shake their heads with the likes of Hillary and Bill Clinton, or the Bushes, or the rest of the theater, whether it's Clinton. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's all a theater of idiocracy. So while this is going on, what are we not seeing when we see every channel covering the same stories of completely trumped up theater? We have immense issues happening around the globe. things that the power structure is desperately trying to hide. We saw Chinese currency devaluation in the last 24 hours, more quantitative easing coming in the U.S. And most people don't know what quantitative easing is. Very technical sounding term. All it means is printing money with no basis. That's all it means. People wonder how this sort of pyramid scheme that's industrialized civilization has been kept moving, especially in the U.S. The U.S. has had the monopoly on money printing because the dollar is the global reserve currency. So what's unfolding right now, a snake can only eat its tail for so long before that process has to end. And we are at that process. The markets are completely rigged, completely manipulated, heavy metals completely manipulated. How is it that gold and silver demand, and all this, by the way, is connected to geoengineering, all of it. For those that don't think any of this is connected or that I'm bouncing around to other subjects, it's all completely connected. So as the environment implodes, it forces the economy to implode. You can't have an economy without a functioning environment. So all this is connected for those that are not connecting those dots already on their own. How do you have heavy metals declining so rapidly when some of the demand is at all-time highs? How does that happen? It happens because for every for every 100 ounces of silver, for example, that are traded on the markets, 1 physical ounce exists. That's some of the best data out there. 1. The rest is fictitious metal. So they can flood the markets with metal that doesn't exist. They can manipulate the price. That's exactly what they've done. How do they keep the markets propped up? Because they print money and buy stocks in companies that are failing. Caterpillar's one. That's a great example. Look up Caterpillar, see how they're doing right now as they're being allowed to fail, if you will. Because those who print the money can prop up whatever they want so long as they have the monopoly on the money printing, which the dollar being the global reserve currency, they have that right, or have had it. They're losing it now by the day. And that's directly connected to the conflicts we see around the globe. The Middle Eastern countries being taken out. Why were they taken out? Again, primarily, in many cases, one of the primary reasons is because those countries wanted to disconnect from the dollar. They did not want to support this juggernaut of global takeover any longer. And how did those countries get destabilized? They were droughted out by global climate engineering programs, GeoEngineering. And they've admitted this on the record. As I've stated before, the leaders of countries like Iran have admitted on the record or stated on the record on the floor of the UN that their countries were being droughted out by NATO weather modification programs. This has been going on for decades. This is, again, as I've stated before, why you have U.S. boots on the ground in so many countries, because they've been slaughtered with climate catastrophes and droughts. And they've been more or less forced to allow U.S. occupation. But this process is coming to an end as the snake can no longer eat its own tail. And this is what industrialized society is. We have Brazilian economies crashing. Greece is crashing. The euro is headed for certain disintegration. We have massive migrant issues. And to watch our media, you'd think somehow this is all going to be resolved. They're going to put in a new economic policy and everything will magically go back to reset. This is delusion, total delusion. When the environment implodes, the game as it was is over. And the environment, again, is imploding. So we have about 2 to 3 dozen countries descending into chaos right now. We have killer heat waves in Japan, India, the Middle East, Europe. As mentioned, I believe last week as well, we have a heat index that's gone as high as 165 degrees in parts of the Middle East. And certainly that's likely weather warfare as well. As we know, the ionosphere heaters, the HARP installations, can cause massive high-pressure domes, this compressing air that creates immense heat. This is part of weather warfare. We can't know at this point what's just the sign of a disintegrating climate that's been in many ways fueled by climate engineering or a direct act of the climate engineering mechanism itself. We can't know. But we do know that the climate system is unraveling completely and geoengineering is fueling that process. And by the way, when we get a heat index of 165, for those that don't know what a heat index is, that's not the actual temperature on the ground. That's a temperature of about 125 degrees with about 50% humidity. But those temperatures are intolerable to the human organism, and it's happening more and more and more all over the globe. Do we hear about this? No. Why? Because the power structure doesn't want us to hear about it. They want us to watch the parade of stupidity in the political arenas, which people still buy into, unfortunately. This division, it's the Democrats and the Republicans, like it matters. It doesn't matter at all. It's two sides to the same coin. It's just theater created to make people think they have some say in the matter when they absolutely, positively don't. So, again, while all this is going on, we have all the issues I already mentioned, the imploding Middle East, the heat waves. We have stories like this, 9/11 families on the verge of proving government involvement in the 9/11 cover-up. Well, that's something the media certainly doesn't want to talk about it. You'd think we'd hear something about it, wouldn't you? But what did we hear about 9/11? All we hear is certain inner circle politicians like Rudy Giuliani and John McCain and the rest of these people who are absolutely a core part of the power structure saying terror, 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 terror. That's all you hear them saying, to try to condition the American population to accept whatever they want to ram down our throats. How can people not see through this? When we have John McCain standing with ISIS leaders, look it up. They were funded by the U.S. They were spawned by the U.S. And I'm not saying other countries are better. I'm not saying China and Russia are better. The most corrupt country in the planet is in direct proportion to that country that has the most power, and I think we all know who that is. So I'm not advocating governments in other countries at all. But I'm saying whatever those other countries do doesn't give us a right to do what we have done and what we're doing to our own people. And for anybody who thinks that 9/11 was what the government told us it was, you're living in a dark place. If you think buildings like Building 7, the third building, by the way, there were 3 buildings that fell that day. Look it up. I'm only asking you to look it up. Search Building 7 collapse online and watch it with your own eyes. And then ask yourself, could that building have fallen because of some furniture burning on the first floor? Really? We need to look at reality. And along those lines, we need to look up and understand we are living under toxic skies every single day, every breath we take. The lies in the political arena are so prolific and growing that it's impossible to truly grasp the immensity of it. And make no mistake, when nature implodes, and nature is imploding right now, and geoengineering is the biggest single factor, not the only factor. And that's a problem too. And even people that are trying to expose and stop geoengineering, try to paint the picture that this is the only environmental problem and nothing else is a problem. That's just as big a lie as those who deny climate engineering. 2 lies don't make a truth. So the bottom line is a lot of issues affecting the environment, geoengineering, the largest single factor of all. And to end with this is a recent publication. And then we'll get on to questions and Russ and Doug. Back to every breath we take. Why is climate engineering the single most important issue of all? Many, many reasons. But here's a primary one relating to the ongoing neurological damage occurring in every single one of us. This is a direct quote from a new study that's just been released. This is the longest and one of the, people are developing dementia a decade before they were 20 years ago, perhaps because of, and this is where we have academia not telling the full truth, perhaps because of environmental factors such as pollution. You know, at this point, as I've talked about before, when you have academia, people with lots of degrees taking lots of years to come up with the most basic and simple confusion or conclusions, if you will, this is a pathetic testimony to the state of our society. But it continues. Dementia is increasing because of environmental factors such as pollution, stepped-up use of insecticides, and a wide-ranging international study has found. Now, you'd think this study, they might consider the fact that there's a mountain of toxic metals raining down on us, but nobody can talk about that. They're not allowed to. So we have the elephant in the room of climate engineering dancing around with nobody acknowledging it. The study continues. The study compared 21 Western countries between the years of 1989 and 2010 and found that the disease, dementia, is now being regularly diagnosed in people in their late 40s and that the death rates are soaring. Think about that. Death rates from dementia are soaring. When we know that dementia is connected with aluminum and we know that there's a mountain of aluminum raining down on us from climate engineering, how can they not connect that dot? because they're afraid for their lives. It goes on. The study was published in the Surgical Neurological International Journal, and its findings publicized in the London Times newspaper Thursday. The problem was particularly acute in the United States, where the neurological deaths in men age over 75 have nearly tripled, and in women risen more than fivefold. That's a 500% increase in dementia mortality. The leader of the study said, this is what the leader of the study told the London Times. Scientists quoted in the study said a combination of environmental factors such as pollution from aircraft. That's all they say. They won't talk about climate engineering, but they state pollution from aircraft and cars, as well as widespread use of pesticides, could be the culprit. When we have film footage of these aircraft dumping literally tens of millions of tons of particulate matter on us, elements like aluminum that we know causes dementia, how can we live in a world, in a society that doesn't have the courage to admit this when they're paid to expose such things? We have a whole society that's helping to hide crimes that are literally killing us all. Almost done. The rate of increase in such a short time suggested a silent or even hidden epidemic. Well, how hidden is it? We have statistics that indicate that we are literally facing a total mental breakdown of society from these neurological diseases that are directly linked to the metals that lab tests have proved are raining down on all of us in absolutely staggering quantities. In Northern California alone, 70 lab tests proving aluminum in our precipitation over a short span of time in a single rain event has increased as much as 50,000%. Highly toxic rain filled with aluminum. How hard is that dot to connect? Last statement, the study found that deaths caused by neurological disease had risen staggeringly in older adults. What's it take? What does it take for people to realize we are absolutely under assault, starting with climate engineering being done by our own government? So it's imperative for everyone to understand the gravity of what we face and that everyone's needed in this battle. That was a long monologue, but some important points were made. Russ, you're there. How's your short-term memory, my friend?
Well, my short-term health overall, I've been struggling since the day I was exposed to climate engineering nightmare. Some of us out there are more sensitive than others. So this 10 years has been a maddening and frustrating journey for me. And it does affect your mental, your cognitive abilities. It is very clear. I receive reports from people all over the world all week. I'm in touch with people. They're talking about. I hear what is going on. People are having digestive issues. They're having cognitive issues. They're having narcoleptic issues. They're tired, sleepy. And these are unfounded things. There's no rational explanation for this. Except, and when we compare our air tests, like you said, you had a dramatic increase in aluminum. We also have collected rainwater samples, dust samples from around the world. We have hundreds of samples now that we've collected, and virtually all these tests are well over the EPA second maximum contaminant limits for drinking in terms of how much aluminum that they contain. And many of these are many times over. And like I've said before, we have 600 micrograms per liter in our own rainwater tests here in Maine. So all of this is working together. People are suffering. And I think, Dane, people are really having right now that this is affecting them personally. I think people are beginning to wake up, at least in some circles.
You're breaking up just a little bit, Russ, but hopefully everybody got that. Maybe you might need to stay really still on your end. To put that into context, micrograms per liter, or the measurements that we get in terms that might be easier for people to understand are generally for aluminum measured in parts per billion, ppb. So to give you an idea of the lab tests in Northern California, when I became aware of the climate engineering issue some 12 years ago, and began to lab test, hoping to prove to myself that it wasn't going on, that this material wasn't raining down on us. I desperately did not want to believe that, because I knew if that was the case, I would have to engage in this battle. I would have no choice but to engage in this fight. Initial lab test of 7 parts per billion taken on the east side of Lake Shasta, forested, filtered location. There's no roads, there's no dust. 7 parts per billion was initial baseline. I spoke to a hydrogeologist who said that's very high, given where you live. And subsequent tests over the next year plus, I had single rain events as high as 3,450 parts per billion, nearly a 50,000% increase, highly toxic rain. How does one not engage in this fight when you realize the gravity of it? Doug, we're all sucking up aluminum on this end of the country. And again, I know people that are having lots of trouble with their short-term memory. That's the first thing to go, by the way, as a sign of aluminum contamination, neurological damage, short-term memory. How's your memory doing, Doug? And how about those around you?
Well, what did you say your name was? No, I'm just teasing. No, I mean, my memory, I think, it doesn't seem to be too unchanged as far as from years ago. I've tried to stay away from vaccines and things like that, but obviously we're breathing it in too, and it all has a collective effect. So, most of the people that I know, at least in my immediate area, my circles here, are completely unaware of almost all of these issues that we're talking about, which are all connected. And I'm just dumbfounded almost every single day that people are not waking up faster. There are people waking up, but I'm really taken aback that people are not waking up quicker than they are.
On that note, and I think you take good care of yourself. I know Russ tries to take care of himself. I try immensely hard to keep these metals moving through my system, and there's some basic ways to do that. So the effect is much greater on some in our society than on others, and that is, in many cases, likely a direct result of the personal diet and healthcare that a person engages in. You can keep these metals moving through your system, and there's some very basic ways of doing that. Avoiding the acidic, sugary Cokes, a lot of good clean water, enough minerals so that your body is not trying to absorb these toxic elements in their stead. A regular chelation program, that there's blue-green algae like chlorella. There's a lot of ways to keep these metals moving through your system, to keep them from lodging and building up. So some of us might be doing a lot better than others, and I encourage those people who become aware of this, go to your local health food store. In Northern California, we have Orchard Nutrition, really exceptional staff there. They are very aware of climate engineering, very aware of the toxins, very aware of the damage being done to the human organism. They're very helpful in putting people on a regime of chelation that can keep these materials moving through your system. So again, I'm grateful to them for what they do, and there's organizations like them all over the country. Seek out your local health food people and have them get you on a program that'll keep you healthier while we wage this war. And on that note, Russ and Doug, one of you mentioned vaccinations. We discussed this off the air a bit, that we have a lot of doctors either dying or disappearing. Doctors who are really in the front lines of proving how lethal vaccinations really are. And here's a recent report. Here's a recent headline. Another Florida doctor murdered, bringing the total to 8 dead and 5 missing in just the last month. And this publication goes on to report this. Last week, reported on a number of doctors, many from the southeastern U.S., who had been killed, died under questionable circumstances, or had simply vanished without a trace. This is the big league, and the truth is beginning to come out, from 9/11 to vaccinations to climate engineering. The truth is beginning to be exposed. The power structure is beginning to crumble, and just like mafia families who fight when there's not enough to go around, I argue the power structure is splintering and will hopefully soon begin to blow apart completely. But it's up to all of us to, again, focus on the most important issues, to put our lives on hold, the lives that we led before we understood what was going on. Before you knew, to a certain degree, you could be held not responsible for not responding to what's going on around you. But aren't we all responsible once we know what's going on? If we claim to love our children, if we claim to be responsible human beings, aren't we obligated at that point to engage in the fight for the greater good once you know? Russ, as you became aware of this issue, you're very dedicated to this battle for the common good. As you became aware, you engaged more and more, correct?
Absolutely. I engaged more and more because I was compelled to, not only for my sense of morality.
Russ, we lost you. We lost you, Russ. Your audio is way down. I can barely hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me see what I can do. Doug, want to respond to that?
Doug, maybe you could fill in there for a minute. I mean, as you became aware of how bad things were, and especially in regard to climate engineering, you're a huge help to me in this fight, and I'm very, very grateful for that. You're very engaged. As you became aware of this issue, your life changed, did it not?
Yeah, it completely changed. I mean, overnight, pretty much. I realized the things that I was paying attention to in my life were not really that important, and it became crystal clear to me that I needed to be involved, which is why I connected with you originally, Dane, because I knew that if there was anything that I could offer in the way of help, that I needed to do it. And it was very obvious to me at that point. But leading up to that point, someone tried to tell me about GeoEngineering. Of course, they used the chemtrails term, several years ago. And I looked into it at that point. And, there was never a point where I thought it was total conspiracy. I knew that it was real, and yet I felt completely helpless. And so it's not like I totally forgot about it, but I just kind of put it on the back burner and went about my life for like another year, really, until I got to a point where I couldn't deny it. I had watched a film called Food Inc., and it connected the Monsanto dots with the aluminum resistant seeds, and then that triggered the memory of the geoengineering and aluminum particulates. So that's kind of what brought me back into it. I watched the film that really kicked it back off for me, but I was aware of it, and then basically, I won't say went back to sleep for a year, but it was easier to just totally ignore it. And that's what I feel that most of my friends, people that I interact with who are not part of the activist group, that's what they do. I mean, they might acknowledge it, but they will not engage with it. They won't do anything with it because they're so programmed that they cannot leave their little cube. They can't think out of the box. Like we talked about last week, the matrix is designed to hold us in place and to not break out of that box.
They'll leave their cube soon because they're going to be ejected from that cube. I agree, people will stay in it as long as they possibly can, but that time is rapidly coming to an end. And I have certainly people in my life too that say, hey, you need to get away from all this. You need to just, go on a cruise or enjoy your life. How do you do that? I can't do that. And look my kids in the eye. As I've said so many times, I have two beautiful, beautiful children. I have a 10-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter that will go out of their way to, any frog they can save, anything they can try to protect. They're, like so many kids. I look at them as a model of all kids around the globe, and don't we owe them our lives? We brought them into the world. Do not we owe them our lives, period. When I became aware of this issue, one of the first films, Clifford Carnicom, who's, I salute his work. I appreciate Clifford. He made a film called Aerosol Crimes, and that's an excellent film. And I think I purchased total out of my pocket about 3,000 of those films. It's still a good film. I encourage people to watch that film today. Clifford made a great film there. So I distributed that film. I tried to think of what way can I best start spot fires of awareness. So, when you hand somebody a DVD that's got good, credible, compelling data on it, and Clifford's film did have that, and I wanted as many of those as I could to spread them everywhere I could to start sowing seeds of awareness. And your life changes. You realize that this battle has to be won, that the forest that you love, that you live in, is dying by the day. And by the way, my forest here is, it's virtually silent. To go out in this forest, to look at everything dying. The most hardy forms of brush and, very hardy organisms are dying, look like they've been hit with a torch. So what do? You have to deal with this issue. Russ, do we have you online again? I mean, is this more or less the process by which your life changed?
Yeah, I'm here. I hope my audio is coming through more clearly now. Let's hope that that's working out. Yeah, Dane, I'm receiving reports. I'm in touch with people, are farmers, people who are gardeners, who are veteran gardeners. I've had pilots contact me. What we're having happen on the ground is people are seeing their plants destroyed. They're seeing what appears to be like acid burns. Their flowering plants are not flowering like they should. Their vegetative plants are not like they should. And we all know that came out just a few months ago that showed that we had glyphosate, which is Monsanto's Roundup, in 75% of rainwater samples. What is all of this glyphosate doing in our rainwater, and what effect is it having on the ground? Seeing the effect of it. We're also seeing the effect of pH change in the soils. We're seeing the pH change, which is an effect of aluminum, as we all know. So I'm getting so much feedback every week, and it is making people angry. People in my circles, at least, are beginning to wake up, and they're beginning to get more aggressive about telling their about this more because they're getting upset about the lies that we're being told and the damage, the very real visible damage. One last thing I'll share with you, Dane, is the bug count. I mean, we know that that the USDA 35-year veteran that you've worked with before of the USDA, the biologist, was reporting about massive insects. I'm seeing it here on the ground. I'm seeing where I used to see 1,000 insects around a house light at night. There's maybe 150, maybe 200 on a good night. Dramatic change in the amount of insects. Decline in birds. The birds chirping. Where have all the birds gone? People are reporting this all over in the areas that are seeing the aerosols in the sky, Dane.
Yeah, it's happening everywhere for sure, Russ. And I'm still having a little bit of issue with your audio, but it's a little better than it was. Doug, can you, on the call-in number, I haven't looked to see if we have anybody online, but can you announce the number there, and we'll, Russ or Doug, and
yeah.
Actually, go ahead.
Absolutely. Our call-in number is area code 929-477-2297. Again, 929-477-2297. I do have Elizabeth in New Jersey on hold here for you, Dane.
Sure, let's take Elizabeth.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Okay, how you doing?
Good. What's going on up your way?
It's just nonstop aerosol spraying, nasty smells of the chemicals, burning your nose, your throat, your eyes. The trees are all full of white and green mold and dying. It's nasty. We get these like massive spraying, and then flooding, torrential downpours and wind, and then it's back to being, spraying and dry, and then it's just crazy. It just never ends. But I wanted to ask you guys and see. I was listening into part of that EPA hearing on airplane emissions, and I noticed at the end the EPA was saying that they're really looking for comments, emails, and they're leaving this open until we have until August 31st to write to them, to email them, and to make the comments on anything we need to do regarding these airplane emissions. So I just thought, well, this may be a good idea for us to continue to wake up the EPA, wake up the public, to literally, plant the seed and let them know and how we feel and how we know what's going on. What do you guys think?
I think it's a great thing to do. I'll let Doug and Russ chime in. I wanted to say something initially to make sure it didn't get missed. It is absolutely imperative to use the science terms in all communications with anybody, especially agencies. To avoid non-science chemtrails term is imperative. I know a lot of people don't want to accept that. But the fact is, we are faced, when we use that term, if the chemtrails term is used, it's an immediate shutdown of any further cooperation from anyone from an agency. They have a license to shut down if they hear that term. You just gave them a license to ignore you, to marginalize you. if you use the science terms, they can't do that. They can't escape so easily. So if we're playing chess, it's imperative we understand how to play the game effectively, how to play the game to win, to bring this issue to light. So I want to stress that, and people that communicate with agencies, use science terms so they can't send you the standard boilerplate, chemtrails is a hoax, I don't want to hear what you have to say anymore sheet. And that's what they do. That's exactly what they do. So I'm glad that you're reaching out to the agencies. We're doing the same here, but we're using the science terms so that we cannot be marginalized.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with that, because I know even when 2 years ago, when I first started my very first letter, I saw the difference with when I said, the chemtrails versus, and then eventually, realizing it. And again, you're right, it's accepted when you use the science terms. And when I would write them about geoengineering and climate engineering, I would at least get a response back, and I mean, seriously, they did take it more serious, and we set up a couple of meetings from that, So I do agree, definitely, that they like to dismiss it and laugh about it and kind of call us different names and things, and it's not, it's not right. But you're absolutely right. I think that they need to understand, the science terms. That's a very good point.
This is what you get. When you tell someone that that's what's happening and they go home and they search chemtrail, here's what they get. Top on the list, chemtrail conspiracy theory. Believers in this theory argue that normal contrails, already insinuating these are just contrails, with a big definition for contrails there, which dissipate relatively quickly, and contrails that do not dissipate must contain additional substances. And it goes on in a very conspiratorial sort of theme and sort of trajectory, if you will, and totally marginalizing anything that would lead anybody to any credible data. And so, again, it's imperative we use the science terms, and this is not to insinuate that this quote-unquote geoengineering or solar radiation management is somehow for the common good. It's not for the common good. There's no benevolence in these programs whatsoever. It's about power and control, and it's destroying the planet's ability to support life more than any other single issue. But that being said, if you can successfully get somebody through the door to make them understand, okay, this is real, it has substance, they will find their way further into the rabbit hole. They will find their way to the realization that this is, in fact, also biological experimentation. It's simply weather warfare. It's about all these other things. They'll find their way there if you can successfully give them the key to the door. And the key to the door is a credible category in which they can find credible data. That's all. Russ, what's your thought? And then we'll go to Doug. We lost Russ. Doug, are you there?
I am there, but I've been screening calls and I missed what you're talking about, so my apologies.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I know I got you working two jobs. All I was saying, Doug, is Elizabeth called in, is that when the chemtrails terms, anybody dealing with anybody else trying to introduce this issue, we should stick to the science terms. Yeah. But especially in regard to agencies or officials, to use the non-science term of chemtrails is to immediately allow them to have a license to marginalize you, and they're well versed in that term. They know when they hear that term that they can completely ignore you, give you the boilerplate sheet that this is conspiracy theory, hoax, and walk away. Correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And what brought to mind when you said that was the David Suzuki interview, because he immediately went to the chemtrails issue. I know he's a scientist, but it's the exact same thing what you just said.
Exactly. A great case in point with two great activists that carried that interview out. Christine and Irene Parausas, great people, heavily engaged in this fight, and that's the kind of engaging we need to expose people like Suzuki. So, in any event, Elizabeth, thank you for pursuing the correspondence with these agencies. And in that correspondence, as we said before, I would suggest strongly to remind them of the fact the public is waking up to this issue. And if you couple that with the science terms and the fact the public is waking up and the public will likely hold them responsible once this is known as accessories in this crime, that's worth pointing out. Do it in a careful manner. Don't do it in a manner that would involve some unjust threat to them, but simply to remind them that we should assume the public will hold them responsible. Why wouldn't they? Does that make sense, Elizabeth?
Absolutely, yes. Just in dealing with the few congressional leaders that we did deal with, I got, kind of a first-hand experience, and it was a slap in the face, but it did wake me up even further on how they do react to this, and I saw the difference. So I did learn a lot just from dealing with those few. And yes, I definitely, even when when we go on the, Twitter accounts and things, very careful in that, and it's more acceptable. Definitely.
Speaking of slaps in the face, if I could mention a video I just saw that was an interaction between a very, very helpful and important activist here in Northern California, Lori Bridgeford, and Congressman Doug LaMalfa, again. And I'm going to post this interaction because it's so astounding. Lori did an exceptional job of confronting at a town hall meeting Congressman Doug LaMalfa. And his absolute arrogance is so shocking, so absolutely shocking, given that we go back in time, I've had personal face-to-face meetings with Doug LaMalfa in his office with his aides, going over this issue, presenting data where it was absolutely not denied. As I've stated before, his Northern California aides used to call me at home on the weekend on their time to express their angst at the ongoing climate engineering, but something happened. The hammer was lowered on them, and now you have to see this video with Doug LaMalfa to believe that a quote-unquote elected official could behave so inexcusably arrogantly and to completely shrug off lab tests, even some tests from the EPA, and you can see in this video he shrugs it off, and I will post this. And this is what we have running our system. People who, as I understand it now, LaMalfa has accepted massive amounts of money from Monsanto. Monsanto, who's, guess what, directly involved in the climate engineering insanity and the cover-up of climate engineering, because they bought Climate Corp for $970 million, a climate disseminating agency. Why? Because they have to control the message. They have to make people believe that the completely engineered and unnatural climate events that are occurring today are somehow just natural. So here we have an elected official completely, again, throwing a concerned citizen into the ditch that has legitimate information. And he's been presented with information straight from EPA, and I'll put that film up too because I filmed me presenting him with this information. And yet he behaves in a manner that the community should be absolutely appalled with. So again, I'll post this. And by the way, as I mentioned before, those same aides at my last event in Reading, one of those aides showed up on her own time, did not have the courage to ask any legitimate questions in public, as is what should be done if she had legitimate questions. Instead, she hid by the door as people were exiting, saying, "Dane's lying." She has since refused challenges to have a dialogue in public with factual information, no even response to that invitation, just a very cowardly behavior by a door, trying to undermine the effort of legitimately concerned citizens to expose an indisputable heavy metal contamination issue, which her boss is ignoring. So anyway, sorry for the long rant. I'm just trying to explain to you that I know what you feel, and I know how hard you've worked, Elizabeth, and I know that you love your son immensely. Luke is a great guy, and I know you're committed to this as much as anybody on the planet. So I thank you for that, and I hope you absolutely keep marching as fast as you can in this. I know you will.
Yes, I will, definitely. And thank you all, too. Dane, Russ, Doug, everybody. I really appreciate the support, and thank you. You guys rock, and just keep doing what we're doing. That's all we could do, is just keep moving forward, right?
Yes, Elizabeth. Thank you for all you've done. Again, we greatly appreciate you. Thanks. If we have anybody else waiting, we'll grab another one.
Yeah, we do. We've got Buckley calling from Missouri.
Hello, Buckley.
Yes.
How are you? What's on your mind?
Oh, well, I think I got my question answered, but I was wondering if there was a way that the upcoming event in Reading was going to be broadcast online or YouTube Live or anything like that. But he said that there seemed to be there was a high cost of doing that, I guess. So
it wasn't just the cost. There were some pitfalls with live streaming. It is being professionally filmed with 3 camera people, and that posting, the film posting of the event will be available to everyone. You can download it, you can copy it, you can share it. Yes, we will absolutely put that out. We have a recent addition to the event, a speaker that will be Matthew Sutton, a CEO of one of the largest environmental and engineering consulting firms in the world, will be there as well. People are starting to make career decisions now, Buckley, that they know that the life they had imagined, retiring with certain plans, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in the way that they imagined. We face very real challenges that can't be ignored any longer. So Matthew's made a decision to make his voice heard in this battle. I salute him for that. John B. Wells, I did John's show today, and he's, of course, a huge asset to us. We just got word that the ABC station in Northern California is trying to line up an interview with him now, which will help us that much more. We're trying to get this issue on the radar. We have physicist Marvin Herndon has just got another study published. My appreciation to Marvin, because he's helping us reach academia with this issue. So everybody's pulling together now. Everybody's moving the ball forward, or so many people are, I should say. And those that aren't, please help us move it forward. But everybody is truly doing their best, and the momentum is growing, Buckley. And I wait for the morning when we see a headline that this issue has been broken, that it can no longer be hidden. And I would argue we're perilously or thankfully close to that time. Our lives are going to change when that happens, because there'll be a shockwave around the globe as the power structure is fully exposed to a population that's going to be absolutely livid. But we need to get to that point. Right.
Well, my wife and I have been doing our best for several years now to get the information, this vital information out to others. And in fact, since it was produced and released, we've made copies and passed out, probably dozens, if not hundreds, of the DVD lookup, the Skyder alert lookup, which is, I feel, one of the best ways to, at least get some preliminary information out, so people can take it from there and do their own research, because they refer to your GeoEngineering
GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so, we direct people. But when I direct people, to listen to this Tuesday show, I direct them to GeoEngineeringWatch.org, or I have been directing them to GeoEngineeringWatch.org website, so that they can listen to the facts on the radio show themselves. But
this whole situation with you, Buckley, and with Russ and Doug, I'm sure all of us did not want to spend our lives doing this. It's not what I would have preferred. I would have rather taken care of the forest where I live and the habitat around me, and grown a garden and spent time with my kids, and none of that's happening. I can't even grow a garden now. In fact, our garden that was 100 feet long, a raised bed that used to be a jungle with no effort at all, we can't grow 10 feet of that at 100 feet. Nothing grows.
Yeah, you're being hit, it seems, a lot harder than we are here in Missouri. In fact, in the last, I would say 95% of the days that's not totally overcast or you can't tell what they're doing above the clouds, there's evidence of chemtrails, aerosol spraying everywhere. In fact, the last couple of days, I have not seen a single aerosol evidence of any aerosol spraying. And I've almost become an expert at telling the difference between, a real cloud and a geoengineered cloud. Or an
if you're saying,
cloud.
I can say this for certain, they are making a very concerted effort to be much more covert in their spraying in many locations, including Northern California. In previous years, we had the horizon-to-horizon trails all the time, and now it's much more sporadic. What we have is these short bursts that go on and off, and if you look closely at the sky, you can see them turning on and off as they move over existing areas where they have some aerosol already built up and they're less visible. Much more effort to be covert, and many people mistake the silvery white skies as being a blue sky now, when it's not. I'm not saying that's the case with you, but if the skies aren't blue and the clouds aren't white and defined, you have aerosols, these cobwebby, wispy clouds. Our skies are almost never, I don't know when I've seen a blue sky. It's been 6 months, 8 months, I don't know when. I mean, our skies are constantly covered. It blows in off the Pacific because they're spraying out there like there's no tomorrow. And so there's a lot of different applications. I just want to caution people, don't think it's just I know you know this, Buckley, but for others, that it's not just the horizon trails. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Any type of trail, bright trail you see out of the back of these aircraft, with almost no exceptions, that's an aerosol spray disbursement. Look at the sky. Watch how silvery white it becomes. Look toward the horizon, especially in the mornings or evenings. You'll see how silvery white it all is. Huge telltale sign of atmospheric aerosols.
Yeah, I've noticed over the last several months that I don't see here in our immediate area that, the obvious tic-tac-toe that we used to see. But what I do see is like they're laying it out in Kansas somewhere. I mean, it's got to be somewhere, because what we're seeing is the aftermath of that, where it's already broken up and formed the wispy, spidery looking clouds, and see very few of the actual, long trails of aerosol. So, they're pounding somebody else over to the west of us, and what we're seeing are the aftermath, where it's already broken down and formed into clouds. And it seems like they're doing a better job of making these things look like natural clouds anymore. I don't know if
they're making an effort to do that, yeah. And most people have no real idea at this point what a real cumulus cloud should look like. It's so defined. When you find an older picture of a truly blue sky with truly white cumulus clouds, it's almost shocking, because it's been so long for most of us since we've seen that. But it's important we remember what should be, and that's what we need to have back, and that's what we're fighting for. That's what our children
right along the line of what. Along the line of what the caller is saying, what we've seen now is we've been witnessing this in multiple locations. I've seen it here. They will spray and then stop and spray and stop, kind of putting dashes in the sky, so that over the ensuing 30 to 60 minutes it forms into something that looks a little bit more like a cloud. And obviously this just looks like an attempt to fool people. Have you seen that there at all?
We have here in Northern California.
I haven't seen the off and on.
We see the off and on here. It's all the time here. Absolutely all the time. It'll start. It looks like someone cut it with a knife. I mean, it goes from a jet leaving nothing behind it to turning on instantly and going across certain patches of sky, turning off again. We see it here all the time. Same effect Russ is talking about, and certainly an effort to be more covert. And if all the mechanisms, we're not insinuating pilots are in the cabin pushing buttons. We're not insinuating that. These are all remote-controlled systems. They're all centrally located. I personally spoke to an executive from Jeppesen. Jeppesen is a subsidiary of Boeing. Jeppesen coordinates all global flights. I spoke with this executive face-to-face, about 15 minutes of peripheral conversation. The moment I mentioned geoengineering, the moment I brought it up, he literally turned his back and walked away, knowing that I knew what he was. And that's the kind of people we have running the world. This man has children, I know. So what kind of man is he exactly? And this is what we're trying to expose.
He's a greedy man that's more interested with his paycheck and his pension. That's
yes.
What it comes down to, in my opinion.
Exactly, Buckley.
It is amazing.
In 2014, before, Dane, that I've tried to call into local radio stations. In fact, the last time that I called in a couple of weeks ago to one of the early morning shows, it was one of those days when I kind of like to wait till you can actually see the evidence of the long horizon trails, so that people that are listening to that show early in the morning can actually look up and see what I'm talking about, and maybe that will spur them to go look into this a little further themselves, or and I always give them your website address. I give them what in the world and why in the world are they spraying. Ask them to go take a look at that. But lately, when I call in, just like the other day, I called in and I told the host that I would like to talk about the aerosol spraying that was happening, and he said, "We're not talking about chemtrails today," and he hung up on me. I never brought up the word chemtrails, you know.
Well, that fortifies the point that I made earlier, though. Again, that is the word they want you to use. My interview with David Pakman, mainstream media hitman David Pakman, he absolutely emphatically insisted I use that word. So it's imperative we beat them at their own game, use the science terms, and we can gain further traction in this event. And we are gaining ground in the disintegrating environment around all of us, and it is disintegrating. We have an Eastern Pacific night now that is astoundingly warm. It's so warm, the algae bloom is immense. It's killing everything. And I don't know how many of listening right now have seen what's happening in the Eastern Pacific. I encourage you to search it and search Eastern Pacific algae bloom die-off. It's a cataclysm unfolding right now from the astoundingly warm oceans. It's imploding around us. So we have to make every day count. We have to bring this issue to light. We have to stop the total derailment of Earth's natural life support systems. That's what we're talking about, in addition to the contamination of every breath we take.
Yeah, two more things, if I could.
Got about 60 seconds, Buckley, so fit it in quick. We're almost done.
Okay. The Saturday morning show that you're doing in Reading, that's not a live show. That's a rebroadcast of this show.
Okay, what it will be. Got about 60 seconds left because I'm so buried right now. We are re-airing this show Saturday morning. But after this week's event, I'll again be doing a monologue filled with data specifically for that show on most mornings. So there may be some live shows at some point, but I'm simply trying to make my time count in the best manner I can. So that's why you can't call in there.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
Thank you. 60 seconds, Russ. Closing comments.
Basically, I just want to help people realize that they are trying to hide this from us, not just like using the dashing in the sky, the on-off pattern that looks a little bit more like clouds after 30 to 60 seconds. But last year in 2014, I spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. And from the beginning of 2015 to the end, when I first went there, it was like a war zone. Later on in the year, maybe 6 times a year you will hear it. 6 times throughout the month will you see the trails in the sky. So they're definitely trying to hide it from us. Dane, any final words?
Nope, I think we're done, guys. Let's keep marching.
Very good. We're here every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific Time on Blog Talk Radio. Please join us, GeoEngineeringWatch.org. Invite your friends. We'll see you next week.